It was all the clods at once become precious. It was the barn and the shed and the windmill, my hands, the crack Arlie made in the axe handle. Oh, let me stay here, humbly, forgotten, to rejoice in it all. Let the sun casually rise and set. If I have not found my right place, teach me. For somewhere inside the clods are vaulted mansions. Lines through the barn sing for the saints forever. The shed and windmill rear so glorious the sun shudders like a gong. Now I know why people worship, carry around magic emblems, wake up talking dreams they teach to their children. The world speaks. The world speaks everything to us. It is our only friend. William Stafford, one of the writers we'll be dealing with on this course. Wonderful poem there called Earth Dweller. The world speaks. The world speaks everything to us. It is our only friend. This course is about writing as if the earth was speaking to you. This course is about writing as if the earth was alive. Now, there are plenty of writing courses around all over the internet. There are plenty you can go to. I'm sure many of them are very good indeed. Maybe better than this one. Plenty of them will focus on making your writing as professional and as accessible and as sellable as possible. They'll teach you about presentation and about genre and about how to give the market what it wants, and maybe they'll even offer you tips on how to write letters to agents and get in touch with publishers and all of this kind of thing. All useful stuff, and this course will be doing none of it. This course is trying to do something rather different. What I want to do is to try to help you uncivilize your writing. What I'm going to do in this video course, which is 4 lessons and a number of assignments, is I'm going to send you outside. Now, it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in the middle of the Alaska National Park. You could be in the middle of London, maybe with access to a public park. I want you to go out and walk through whatever the landscape throws at you in search of stories. I'm going to show you how to write from the point of view of an oak or a seagull, how to build stories around images, how to pay close attention, silent attention to what you see around you, to write with all of your human senses fully engaged, to rediscover old ways of seeing, generally to loosen up your over-civilized style. I want you to write as if the earth were alive, as if the world speaks to you, as if it were your friend, as if you were its friend, as if you were not at the centre of attention. Now, this course, which I call Rewild Your Words, is based on a course I developed myself. I've been running it around the world now for many years, mostly in Britain and in Ireland, where I live, occasionally in other more far-flung places like the United States. Now I'm trying it out online, because it's what we all do now that we're not allowed out. And this course consists of 4 video lessons. This is the first one, a fairly short introduction. The next 3 are a bit more substantial. Each of these lessons contains a talk and a teaching by me, illustrated by examples from writers. I've got a good collection of writers to be sharing with you. It's my pile of books, or at least one of my piles of books that we'll be dealing with. Everyone from Gary Snyder to Robinson Jeffers, Robert Bly to D.H. Lawrence, Annie Dillard, Mary Oliver, Black Elk, Gerard Manley Hopkins. A great big pile of my favourites, people who have written as if the earth lived and tried to make their writing into something which spoke back to it. All of the sources I quote and all of the poems I read and the books I recommend, they're all listed in the course materials on Thinkific. You can follow them up at your leisure. And like the course itself, once you've paid for it, you have lifetime access to it, so you can spend as much time as you want perusing that. Finally, each one of these videos contains at least one writing exercise which I'm going to give you based on the talks and the teachings I do in that film. And I want you to take your time over those, and by time I mean at least a few hours for each one, and more of them if you can. And as I've explained on the course page itself on the Thinkific site, you are able to send me at the end of the course, if you want to, one of these assignments of up to 1,000 words, and I'm going to offer you feedback on that and help on it if you'd like it. So that's the structure of the course. So what are we doing here? What are we doing? Well, as I've said, I want to teach you to write as if the earth lived and as if you were part of it. The world speaks to us, says Stafford. The world speaks to us. It's our only friend. The Irish writer John Moriarty says something a little bit different but related. He has this phrase in his autobiography Nostos. He says, matter is mind in hibernation. Matter is mind in hibernation. So what's he talking about there? Well, he's saying the same thing, really. The earth is alive. Everything lives. And by everything, I mean you, as the writer. I mean your surroundings. I mean other conscious beings. I mean the so-called environment that we all write about all the time. But we often write about in a kind of pseudo-objective way, as if it were just a backdrop to the more important thing that we want to talk about, which is us. Well, I want you to write as if you were a player in the drama and not just as an observer. Let me quote you something from another writer, Barry Lopez, the American writer, wrote a wonderful book called Arctic Dreams, and many others as well. There's an essay Lopez wrote, quite a long, quite a dense essay called At the Juncture of Landscape and Memory. Well worth looking up. Again, I'll put that in the source materials at the end of the course. What Lopez is trying to write about in this essay is what he calls two landscapes. The landscape within us and the landscape outside of us, and how he says these two things connect with each other and how that can inform writing. Let me just quote a little bit from this essay about two landscapes. Lopez says this: I think of two landscapes, one outside the self and the other within. The external landscape, firstly, is the one we see. Not only the line and the colour of the land and its shading at different times of the day, but also its plants and animals in season, its weather, its geology, the record of its climate and evolution. So these are all elements of the land, and what makes the landscape comprehensible are the relationships between these elements. He says, one learns a landscape finally, not by knowing the name or identity of everything in it, but by perceiving the relationships in it, like that between the sparrow and the twig. So that's the first landscape, the landscape outside. Then he writes, the second landscape I think of is the interior one, a kind of projection within a person of a part of the exterior landscape. The speculations, intuitions and formal ideas we refer to as our mind are a set of relationships in the interior landscape with purpose and order. The shape and the character of these relationships in a person's thinking, I believe, here's the key part, are deeply influenced by where on this earth one goes. What one touches, the patterns one observes in nature, the history of one's life in the land, even a life in the city, where wind, the chirp of birds and the line of a falling leaf are known. These thoughts are arranged according to the thread of one's moral, intellectual and spiritual development. So that, as I say, in some ways is quite a dense idea, but in other ways is a very simple one. The key point there is your interior landscape, everything you have going on in here, which is ultimately what you're going to be drawing on as a writer, whatever you're writing. That is always, always, always in a relationship with, responding to the exterior landscape you're in, whatever that is. Could be an office you're sitting in, could be a deep rainforest. The shape of your mind and your heart and your soul and everything you put onto the paper or onto the screen is as affected by the land as it is by your genes. Now another way of putting that, and a much shorter way of putting that, comes from Wendell Berry, who says if you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are. And that's one of the key ideas, I suppose, at the heart of all my writing, actually, whatever form I'm writing in. If you don't know where you are, you don't know who you are. You are not some atomized individual moving through space making intelligent, rational consumer choices. That's what modernity would like to tell you are, but you're not. You're a product of everything that's formed you, of your family, of your history, of your place, and of the landscape where you are, which may or may not be the landscape where you come from. It may just be the landscape you're on holiday in, but it affects you. And we've all felt that. We've all felt the landscape, particularly wild places with very little human development in them, having a deep impact on us in ways that we can't necessarily understand, and we don't necessarily have to. But what we do try to do as writers is to try and project that onto the page somehow, to try and create a feeling in our words about what that is. So two landscapes, inner and outer, and one of the things we're going to try and do on this course is to harmonise those through our words, rather than to pretend that they can be separated from each other. Now, in our culture, which is really built, in my view, around the worship of the individual self and its much vaunted freedom, our writing, particularly our novels, the kind of things that get printed and distributed in the mainstream, in our culture here in the West, this writing is usually mainly about the inner landscape. That's what we see as the important bit, right? What's happening in us, the very important internal contradictions and difficulties in our personal lives. The outer landscape in a book these days usually, and for a long time, is usually the backdrop, the scenery, the environment, the stage on which our dramas are performed. This course says no, that is not what we do, that is not right. You're not an individual actor, you don't get to choose separately from the living earth because you're part of that. You haven't suddenly disappeared from the world, you're part of the living earth. Everything's alive, including you. You're not outside anything. The notion that you can sit as a writer with your pen in a forest, and we'll come to this in our first substantial lesson, and somehow write about that forest as if you were not part of it, by doing that, is a fiction. You're not outside. You're not an observer. You're not in the audience. You're part of the play. Part of the play of everything that's alive on the earth. What does that mean for your writing? Well, one thing it means is I'm not going to be teaching you how to do nature writing. That term is banned and shall never be mentioned again. Let me quote you something from the American nature writer Gary Nabhan. Nabhan was criticising the tendency that we have to categorise all of our writing into little slots, something that marketing people and publishers and bookshops do, and increasingly, disturbingly, writers do as well, where we decide what kind of genre we're writing in. And you walk into a bookshop and you see that over here are the political books, and over here is the fiction, and over here is the history, and then over here in the corner probably is the nature writing section. Well, Nabhan suggested that we should reclassify these classifications, these categories. He suggested that what is currently classified as nature writing should be reclassified as simply writing, and that everything else should be classified as urban dysfunctional writing, which I agree with. Good plan. I'm not going to teach you to nature write because there's no nature. What I mean by that is there's nothing separate from you which you can put into a little box saying all that stuff out there is nature, and I go and look at that at the weekend in the national park, maybe write a lovely poem about it, and then go back to the city to live my practical actual life. You are nature. Nature is you. Everything lives. The city is nature too, by the way. Everything you live in. There's no such thing as nature. No pre-agricultural or non-agricultural or non-modern society really would even recognise this term. It's a term invented by people who think they're apart from life, and are currently in the process of learning otherwise, possibly painfully so. What I'm going to do on this course is I'm going to ask you to consider a possibility, and the possibility is this: that the earth has something to say to you, and that it has something it wants to say through you, and that your particular part of the earth, wherever you are, wherever you come from, wherever you live, wherever you've been, perhaps, if you pay enough attention to it and learn to listen, will be able to speak to and through you. Now, there is a story you can tell by listening, by really paying attention to the place on the earth where you are, wherever that is. Now, if this seems a bit too woo-woo to you, a bit too mystical, my suggestion is, either don't pay for the course, unless you already have, in which case apologies, but actually my main suggestion is just go with it. Go with it anyway. Follow this through, see where it takes you. The worst thing that can happen to you is you'll come away learning, I hope, to pay attention to things and to write in a slightly different way than you had before. The best thing that can happen to you, I hope, if the course works, is you take seriously as a writer and as a human being the possibility that the living world, everything that's out there, all the other beings who share this world with you and me, are not just extras in the human story and the writer's story, but they're sharing it with us. They're not just the backdrop, they're the characters in their own right. And a question I want you to take away with you from this little introduction is this: if you take that notion seriously, if you take seriously anything I've said for the last 5 or 10 minutes, how would that change your writing? How will that change your writing? How will that change what you write about and how you write it, if at all? Think about that. Now I'm going to give you one little exercise from this introductory session, and I want you to go away and do this. Spend a bit of time on it, dwell on it, before you start the second video. It's a very simple exercise. You pick up a pen or a pencil, you pick up your drawing pad, your writing pad, your notebook, whatever it is, and you write down the story you came here to tell. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, I don't know what you're talking about, I just wanted to do a course. You came here because you had something you want to write. whether you know it or not. You may not know it. You may have come on this course because you've got a particular book you're writing, a poem you want to work on, a project that you want to try and develop, and you think this might help. You may have come here just because you're interested and you don't think you've got a project. Either way, I will suggest to you that you do have a project, and if you don't know what it is, that's all good, but you will soon. I want you to sit down and I want you to write without thinking. Okay? Without thinking, just let it come for 5 minutes. Seriously, set your alarm clock, set your watch, sit down, get going, just write without thinking what will come next. Write the story you want to tell. You may surprise yourself by what comes out of your pen. This is a very useful exercise. It's called proleptic writing, borrowing from Robert Graves, and we'll be doing much more of it later and talking about it too. But just sit down, give yourself 5 full minutes, start writing, don't stop until the 5 minutes is up. Write down the story you came here to tell. And when you've done that, and when you've considered that, maybe when you've slept on that, start on the next film. I hope this has been useful, and I hope also to see you on the next part of the course.